The best way to get better at programming is to practice. And in this example, we're going to look at Swing's null layout system to create a Java GUI. As always, these files are available for download. Use the link provided below in the description. We'll pause for a couple seconds so you can download it, and then we'll continue. Alright, so let's get started. Creating a null layout is very simple. First, we're starting off with what we've seen before. We've looked at some of these other layouts. And you can just see everything kind of listed here already. So I'm going to come here and set my null layout. So I'm going to say this.set layout, and I'm going to set it equal to null. Now, when I do this, a couple things are going to happen. First off, I'm saying I'm not using a layout manager. So I'm not using like a flow layout manager. I'm not using a border layout or anything that we've looked at before. I'm actually literally saying I'm not going to use anything. If I go and run this real quick, you'll notice that even though I have added elements, nothing's showing up. This is because we're not using a layout manager, therefore we have to define everything. So I'm going to come down here and close that out. Here's where I've added my elements to my general object, but what I want to actually do is come in here and now position my elements. So I'll say btn1.set bounds. And my bounds can be either two formats, either an XY and then a height and a width, or I can specify a rectangle for it to be in. They both provide the exact same information. I'm just going to say the 4 different integers. I'm going to say it needs to be at initially 10, and then a height of 10, a width of 200, and a height of 50. If I run that, you can now see that one button is appearing based upon those sizes. Now I could go in and say, oh, I'm going to set btn2, then btn3, and btn4. However, since they're all buttons, they're all going to be about the same size. They're all going to be positioned maybe in a couple of columns or rows, things like that. So I have a lot of the same values that are going to be used over and over and over again. So let me close this out and show you this nice little trick. Real simple, I'm just going to say int width equals, and I already have 200 here, so I'm going to keep that, and int height, and the height was 50. That was maybe a little bit tall, so I'm just going to say 40. And now I'm going to replace my width of 200 with my variable width, and my height of 50 with height, like that. So this is my first kind of inclination as to how I can lay this out. I'm then going to set up here int column 1, that's going to be equal to 10, and then int column 2, this is going to be the 10 plus my width plus any spacing I want. So I'm going to say 225. So I replace the 10 in my button 1 with column 1. Now I can come over here, btn2.setBounds, and I'm going to specify column 2. Then I'm going to specify 10, it's the same row, height and width. btn3.setBounds. Now, if I have a lot of rows, I might not put in a row. I just put in some values, kind of like what I'm going to do here. If I don't have a lot of rows and everything's just on 1 or 2 rows, I have lots of columns, then instead of specifying a column variable, I'll specify a row variable. So in this case, my y, I need it to be my height of 40 plus any spacing I want. So when I set up my new value, I want to think, okay, where do I start from? How big is it going to go down to? It's going to go down to about 50 pixels. How much spacing do I want to have? So I'll just say 60. btn4.setBounds. This is going to be column 2. It's once again going to be 60. And my height and width, notice they're not changing. This is really nice. Now, sometimes if I have like labels and they're going to be small and then we have like text areas or something, those will be bigger. And so I'll have a couple different width sizes or maybe different height sizes if I'm using drop-down boxes and different things like that. That's completely dependent upon your application. So this was a just real simple example. Let me do one last one. btn5. Column 1, new value, 60 plus 40 is 100, spacing, so it's going to be 110, width and height. Now we go and run this, and you can see all my spacing is now there as you would expect. Now you will notice that my buttons in the right-hand column are cut off, and that goes, oh no, it's because of my size. Okay, so how do I fix this real easily because my window wasn't quite big enough? Well, I've got 2 solutions. Number 1, I can make the size of my JPane bigger, or I can make the size of my buttons just a little bit smaller. So if I come right here and close that, just as an example, my width, I'm going to say is going to be 180 instead of 200. And then that means my second column, I'm going to do this as 205. Run this. And you can notice that now everything's kind of fitting. I don't have any spacing off to the right-hand side, so I might need to adjust it just a little bit more to make it even. But you can see how easy it was to fix it by having those variables there. It was just a real quick change, 2 values, and I was done. So just kind of keep that in mind when you're working with something like this. That makes it really, really easy to work. Now, there's a lot of power in the null layout system, and that is you get to implicitly say where everything's going to be. But I do want to show you one downside. You've noticed sometimes in previous examples, I've resized my window and everything is moved with it. However, if I resize this window, notice that everything is fixed. And that's a downside to null layout. Does make it a little bit easier to lay out, but you get this type of problem where things are fixed in place, and that may not be what you want. So keep that in mind when you're picking a null layout. Is this really what you want? Make it a little bit easier on the front end, might make it harder on the back end. Hopefully you found this example helpful. If so, please give the video a like and consider subscribing so you can see how to get better at programming in Java.